The last few weeks of Jets hockey haven't exactly inspired a lot of confidence, but there are still 9 games left for the Jets to get back on track. Find out how they can do it right now on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Jets fans, and welcome to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, more than anything, we just love and appreciate your support and that you are continuing to listen along as this Jets season rolls along. And speaking of Jets seasons rolling along, it's been kind of a crappy last few weeks, maybe even a few months, if we're being honest. The Jets keep losing to playoff teams while only beating up on the crappier teams, which doesn't really make you feel great heading into the playoffs. Let's be honest. I think a lot of us, we're expecting better, not necessarily surprised by some of the outcomes, because I think the biggest problem with the Jets is that what's happening now has happened before, right? Whether it was under Maurice or Bonus, this is not exactly new territory for the Jets. And so it's not really surprising, but it is frustrating that we're back here again. And I think for the Jets to continue to keep circling the same wagon and coming away with the same results, at some point you have to ask yourself, when do you get tired of it? Are you just going to keep doing this over and over again? Or are you actually going to maybe make a few adjustments? And with the Jets rolling up on the last 9 games of the season, obviously there's not a lot of time left for Winnipeg to kind of sort it out. This is the stage at which, the Jets, they really have to kind of do or die. I mean, there's no other way to say it. The Jets are in the final stretch. They're still running into the same problems that they've been through time and time again, and there's no real time for them to really fix things. So if they can't get things started off with a big win against, say, the Sens tomorrow, I don't know where you go from there, right? The Jets have to claw back in this one. They have to really show that they're capable of beating some of these quality opponents that they're going to be facing on the road here in a few games, because right now we haven't really seen a top line that's functional, a power play that's functional, and much of anything else that gives you a lot of confidence. They did play well at 5v5 against the Knights, but at the end of the day, guess what? They still lost. They played well at times during the Capitals. Guess what? They still lost. So you kind of see this theme of the Jets maybe playing well against opponents and still losing. Or in a lot of other cases, they just got smoked in many other games. And whether the Jets beat the Sens or not, I don't think that's necessarily going to sway a lot of hearts and minds. What I want to see, though, is if the Jets can at least approach the game the right way, right? If they're, controlling play at 5v5, if they are doing a lot of the detail plays and zone exits and stuff that can help give this offense more room to work with, things would probably feel a little bit better. But as it is right now, I just don't really feel like this is a game where even if Winnipeg smokes Ottawa like 8-0, I'm really going to take away anything from it, right? I think the main thing is, can they at least demonstrate some of the basic stuff and get back to that? Because for all the steps forward that we've seen from this team, they haven't made the most meaningful ones in the critical times. And that's where I think for me, Winnipeg has continued to fall short this year. Earlier in the first half of the season, they did everything right and things felt like this team would never come crashing down. But here we are, a few months later, calendar year switched over, and the Jets just don't look like the same team. But truthfully, they probably had these issues the whole time. We just never really saw them because Winnipeg, look, they were riding a bit of a PDO high. They had great goaltending. They had great shooting percentage. Everything was kind of clicking along. Now things have kind of hit a bit of a wall, and the Jets have suddenly found themselves unable to get over it. And I think that's been a really tough thing. If you're looking for a positive, I guess, the Jets are kind of facing a softer slate of opponents here compared to like dealing with the Devils, the Oilers and the Knights. Ottawa, LA, and Calgary are probably the nicest way to start off, the final stretch of the season that you could ask for, because after that, the difficulty ramps up tenfold. You've got Minnesota, Nashville, Dallas, Colorado, Seattle, and Vancouver to close out your season. And so this next 3-game stretch could really make or break Winnipeg's final run of form. And if the Jets continue to struggle against these opponents and can't take advantage of these home matchups, I mean, you might as well start thinking about, next season already, because the Jets in the playoffs, I have to say, I'm not expecting a lot of adjustments. I can't imagine that Bones is going to make a bunch of big changes heading into the playoffs anyways. So, Winnipeg kind of has to work with what it's got. And like I said, there's 9 games for the Jets to sort all of this out. Winnipeg can absolutely come back this season. They have the firepower to actually be a quality team. It's just getting over the fact that for some reason they can't see around the pairing of Connor and Scheifele and use Ehlers with them. I don't understand why this is still a thing. You have to make the executive decision. You have to be the adult in the room and make the decision and force it, because the Jets are forcing every other option left to them, and none of them have worked. And we've seen the same options time and time again. And this is where the Jets absolutely have to come away with some sort of progress. Winnipeg can't keep backsliding. They can't keep looking like a team that's not ready for the playoffs. If the Jets really flame out here, I wouldn't be shocked if attendance next year really takes a hit. I got to be honest, I think fans were just starting to get back into this team and buy in, and look at what's happened again. There's a lack of performance from the coaching staff. The players night in and night out look frustrated and annoyed, and despite some really good shifts, they haven't been able to pull off wins. And while you can definitely praise some of the process, at the end of the day, the outcome is still very important, and the Jets haven't gotten those. So, for Winnipeg, this is a big test. There have been many tests this year, and recently they've failed a lot of them. I hate to say it, but they have not aced the way I thought they were going to. The Rangers game was a really nice exception, but I thought that would start off a nice streak, and instead that rest of the road trip was horrible. And then, the Jets come home and drop 2 more games, and it just feels like Winnipeg is mired in one of the biggest slumps of the season. And it's not like they've played poorly for every game of it, but you know what? You still got to find a way to win. And the Jets haven't been able to do that. So, really bad vibes. And, you worry that this stuff bleeds into the playoff run. But if the Jets can win 2 or 3 of these next few games, and then you start your road trip, hopefully with a victory, maybe even 2 victories, if you can vanquish the Preds somehow, I think it would do a lot to make us feel a lot better. I'm not saying that the Jets have to win out the rest of the schedule. Not asking for that. What I am asking for is a process and also some results. Process is great, but if you lose the rest of your games, you're not looking at particularly great playoff seeding, and actually you start to risk maybe even sliding further and further down into the standings. Not necessarily missing out on the postseason. I think it would take something crazy for that to happen. The Jets are pretty firmly entrenched in the playoff spot, but in terms of controlling your own destiny and everything, I think that's where the Jets really should be. Make this last run of games the time for you to make a few adjustments. Look in the mirror, find that extra reservoir within yourself, and also get the coaching staff on the same page. I don't understand what the coaches are out doing there. It feels like there's just a lack of inventiveness and a lack of ideas and solutions. And, to the average observer, I mean, some of these solutions really shouldn't be that difficult. I know that hockey can be a very complex sport, and tactically, there's a lot of considerations and personalities and human factors to take into account. It's not just the tactical side of things. You have to manage the locker room of emotions and everything. But, at some point, you have to make the hard choice, because if the Jets keep sucking and losing, that's going to be even worse for the room. The guys are not going to take that well. You might see another blowout like we did with Bones at the end of last year. We can't go through that again. Like this team is too special and too fun to go out with another whimper. I really want the Winnipeg Jets to make the deepest run that they can, because you are not guaranteed next year that Hellebuck and Brossoit or whoever's going to be the backup does this incredible performance again, backed by a pretty strong roster on paper. So a lot of stuff to figure out, but hey, the good news is Gabriel Vilardi may actually have a shot at lacing up for the Jets in tomorrow's game against the Sens. We'll talk about what the Jets can expect against Ottawa and what line combos we're currently looking at. But before we go any further, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your vehicle alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your car and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has your back. With over 122 million parts for your number one vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the victory. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are slightly commiserating after a bit of a rough stretch of games recently. You know, the comments section on our last episode was, whew, yeah, pretty testy. Not so much that people were upset with me or anything, but certainly with the team. Yeah, I think the vibes were not great. And the Jets are certainly running into a bit of a wall. And I think, you know, for how Winnipeg has been this season, you did expect at some point that there would be some slumps here and there because they just could not sustain the level of performance that we saw at the first half of the season. But I don't think we all thought it would come crashing down again like it did last year. That, I think, was a little more alarming and a little more surprising. So, you know, vibes bad, but like I said, I'm not going to read too much into a victory against Ottawa, but you still got to clear out the schedule in front of you. And with the Jets having a really big opportunity at home to try and salvage something here, they have got to take advantage of this matchup. Winnipeg's going up against the team that's got Shane Pinto on the first line. Even if the Jets didn't have Scheifele, Winnipeg should still be able to beat Ottawa. But I think that's also asking a lot of the Jets, given how they are seemingly in their own heads right now and also can't seem to buy a goal. For how the Sens are lining up, though, you've got the Chuck, Pinto, and Batherson on the first. Second line is Cruikshank, Stutzla, and Giroux. Third line is Kubalik, Greg, and Joseph. And the fourth line is Kachuk, Kastelik, and Kelly, right? So there's a lot of middle six and depth forwards spread out across this lineup. And the Sens have had some games where they've looked okay at times. But generally speaking, Ottawa is towards the bottom of the East for a reason. This is a bad team. They have generally struggled. A lot of their opponents have gotten the better of them recently. But past few games, they've started to turn up the heat a bit. They embarrassed both the Devils and the Sabres and also beat the Oilers. So recently, there's been a little bit more of a turn in form. The offense for Ottawa has started to pick up a bit, but you kind of sandwich that around, you know, losses to teams like St. Louis, Carolina, San Jose. So, you know, this is not a team that I think a lot of folks are super optimistic about heading into next year. You know, Ottawa at this point is a team that just keeps skating that middle ground of being decent at times and fun to watch, but very flawed and seemingly incapable of sustaining a run of form for more than just a few games at a time. Now, for the Jets, it probably doesn't make Winnipeg feel particularly great that the Sens are on a 4-game winning streak right now. You know, despite the uneven form, this is a team that the Jets, while they absolutely should beat them, you can't take it lightly. And it sounds really stupid, but I think with how the Jets have been recently, you know, Winnipeg just doesn't have the luxury of looking down on anyone. And they shouldn't to begin with, right? Whether I say they should beat a team or not, we all know hockey is chaotic and random. And with how Winnipeg has been recently, there's no telling what's going to happen against a squad that's looking more for a lottery pick than it is a playoff spot. So for the Jets, you know, I think it's important to, you know, keep focused, come out strong, show the fan base and the team itself that, you know, the players are still bought in, that everyone's still ready to go, and that they're prepared for a comeback and a resurgence, because a slow start where Winnipeg goes down immediately is just going to keep reinforcing the same bad vibes. And I think for what Winnipeg is really needing to do here, they have got to continue to build on some of the stuff that they did against Edmonton, Washington, and Vegas, right? There were some signs of life. It looked decent at times at even strength, but the Jets now have to actually turn that into something sustainable and, you know, start punching some goals in. By the same token, you know, Winnipeg had better, you know, get honestly figure out a way to hold Rick accountable for this. I feel like the coaching staff, both, on the special teams and even strength side, really needs to take a hard look in the mirror and figure out if this is really the best fit for them. I think after this season, the coaching staff should really see a changeover anyways. I think this team is too talented to have gone through 2 straight years of some of the same stuff happening again and again. And with Winnipeg running out of time with this core, you got to look at the front office to perhaps make a few really hard decisions. But while everyone is still here, there's still a job to do. There's still a chance. And Winnipeg definitely does not want to waste a major shot at glory this season. So Winnipeg definitely has a lot of work to do. Starting off with the win against the Sens, like I said, no one's going to be impressed by it in the sense that, Ottawa is a team that the Jets on paper should definitely be able to take advantage of. But, at the end of the day, the Jets, you got to just do what you got to do to come out with victories, right? Whether you're taking on the Oilers or the Knights or Ottawa or even Buffalo, get to work, take care of business, do what you got to do. It doesn't have to be pretty. It'd be nice if it was controlled. I think that's the main thing I'm asking for. Maybe a power play goal or 2. I feel like we're a little overdue for that. Maybe a big top line performance. Something, give the fans something to latch onto, because we're all looking for more than what we've seen recently. And got to say, the vibes aren't going to massively turn around with the victory against Ottawa, but at least we have a little bit of confidence heading into the games against LA and Calgary before the Jets really hit a rough stretch and go on the road. And we'll talk about that road stretch in just a moment and how Winnipeg can really start to prepare for that, because that's going to be one of the hardest runs of the season. And with how the Jets have been recently, can't say I am abundantly confident, but at least Ottawa is about as straightforward a game as you could possibly ask. I think, this could be a trap game, though, because Ottawa plays a very fast, up-tempo style. And against, Winnipeg's poor ability to defend rush counters and stuff, that may end up being a bit of an Achilles heel for the Jets. So let's just hope that the Jets are capable of slowing the Sens team down without, getting themselves into penalty trouble. I know Ottawa has given Winnipeg fits before. And, at this point, I don't even know what I'm expecting. As much as I say this should be a straightforward win for the Jets, it almost never is. And it's been that way, especially in the back half of this season. So, yeah, I just want to watch some wins at some point. I think that's all any of us are asking for, something that looks semi-competent. So go Jets go, come away with a victory, and at least give us something to feel a little bit better about. But like I said, after this, the Jets have a really tough stretch of games. I'll talk about what that might look like for Winnipeg and kind of what I'm expecting record-wise in just a moment. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Jets as we're wrapping up. Obviously, Winnipeg has some business to take care of against some softer teams at home. They're going to get the Sens, Kings, and Flames. Now, the Kings are definitely a solid team, and they've started to rebound and form and climb back into the Pacific Division race, not really competing for a top spot, but perhaps maybe fighting for second or so, maybe in the mix. They just want to probably avoid the wild card is my guess. Having to go into the wild card means you're likely to face one of the Central Division teams, and that is really not a fun place to be if you are the Kings. After that, though, the road gets really challenging because Winnipeg is actually hitting the road for 4 games, and it is all through the Central Division. And that's where I think you're really going to see what this team is going to be like in the postseason. So far, if the recent evidence is anything to go by, it's not good. The Jets have struggled against teams like Nashville, Dallas. We haven't seen the Avs in a long time, but I got to say I don't really have a lot of confidence that it's going to be all that much different. The Avs have been on a massive run of form lately. They're tearing apart opponents, and their style of hockey is one that always gives the Jets fits. Winnipeg has won a couple of their recent matchups, but in some of those games, the Avs have had really injured rosters, or, the Jets were perhaps a little bit more fortunate and flattered by the scoreline than the underlying numbers would suggest. So for the Jets, this is a brutal stretch. It's really going to show what this team is capable of heading into the postseason. And I think it's probably the last big set of games for the Jets to make any final adjustments, because at this point, Winnipeg has probably locked in what they want to do with their lineup. I have a feeling it's going to crash and burn based on what Bones has done. Maybe he surprises us, though. Maybe he finally makes a couple of the needed adjustments. I would just like him to actually commit to it for once. I'm tired of seeing the Jets abandon something that's working mid-game. They keep doing it, and it just drives me insane because this team will suddenly find a formula that looks halfway decent, and then they're like, let's go back to the crap that didn't work. And I for the life of me, it's insanity, right? You keep running into the same thing. You keep doing it over and over again. And unfortunately for the Jets, that has come at the cost of some big wins and some chances to really build some momentum. So, for the next few games, I think the Jets will probably win 2 of the next 3. I would say Ottawa should be a victory. I think the Jets will probably beat the Flames. LA could be a bit of a loss. We'll see. I don't know about that one. I have a hard time feeling very optimistic about LA because the Kings have a pretty strong team and they've played a pesky brand of hockey that has gotten Winnipeg in trouble. After that, from the road trip, I would say I'm expecting maybe 2 wins. I think the Jets are going to be lucky to come away with two victories, if I'm being honest. Honestly, they'd be kind of on a miracle run if they actually got even an overtime loss out of one of the other 2 defeats, right? I think the Jets coming out with 5 of 8 points on the road would be super impressive considering they're facing the Wild, the Preds, the Stars, and the Avalanche. When the Wild are your worst opponent in that stretch, you are facing a pretty brutal slate of games. After that, Winnipeg has Seattle and Vancouver to close out the year. I mean, at that point, I don't know that anyone's really going to read too much into those games. Kraken are out of the playoffs, and Vancouver will probably be rotating some guys. I'd imagine the Jets will too, because it's the end of the year. And, I think everyone just wants to stay healthy, right? At this point, it's more about, consolidating playoff positions, making sure that you're in the seed that you want to be, and kind of going from there. Funny enough, the more the Jets win, the more it is that they're likely to face a really tough team like Dallas or Colorado. So maybe being in the top 3 of the Central is actually not that preferable. Who's to say? I don't even know if it matters. You don't want any part of Vancouver or Colorado or Dallas or even Nashville. So what difference does it make? You might as well just take your lumps in the first round. And if the Jets really are for real, they'll beat them. They'll beat their opponents. But if they're not, they'll be out in the first round like they were last year. And we'll just kind of go back to doing what we always do, which is hope for another decent offseason and pray that something, positive happens in the coaching staff side of things so that we actually have something to look forward to next year. But for the Jets, tough road ahead. I'm hoping at least that Winnipeg can give us some semblance of joy before they enter what could be a very joyless playoffs. I don't know. I've kind of run out of things to say at the end of the year, and I've felt a little bit let down by the recent run of form. But, there's always a little part of me that says tomorrow's another day, and the Jets might come away with a big victory. So cross your fingers for something to give us some positivity to build off of. I'd like to be able to talk about fun things with the Jets again, and I hope you also are looking forward to something that's a little bit more exciting and hopefully a little more positive after tomorrow. But the report for that game will be out on Monday. I'll let you know how it goes. Anything we notice and anything that we can take away and build off of, we will be sure to cover. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We'll see you back here next week, so don't go anywhere. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And as always, have a great night, and go Jets go.